The Commission resumes. I'm sorry we started later than we thought we would, but there was a little bit of housekeeping we had to attend to. National Commissioner, I see you come back in response to our requests. Thank you very much indeed. Would you please stand? I think it was a long time ago when I saw you in, so I think I better do it again if you don't mind. That's not a reflection on you, but just good order, you know? All right. You swear that the further evidence you'll give before this Commission will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please raise your right hand and say, I swear so help me God. Thank you. Please be seated. The reason for part of the reason for the delay was I was going to question you, and I think I still will, but not to the extent I thought I was going to, about some phone calls you made and received on the 16th of August. And the evidence leaders have produced a document which reflects your telephone calls on your mobile telephone from the 14th of August to the 16th of August. What exhibit would that be?
Chair, it would be, triple F44.
Triple F44. I believe Mr. Semenya has given you a copy. Is that correct? Yes. All right. Now, National Commissioner, since you were last with us, we've received information on a number of topics which we didn't have previously. And so I'd like to ask you about some of these topics. The first one relates to the phone calls you got on the 16th. On, I think it's the 5th page of this exhibit. Yes, the 5th page of the exhibit. We see that there are a number of calls, what looked like calls, between you and Lieutenant General Mbomba, the Provincial Commissioner, and also some calls apparently emanating from the South African Police Service spokesperson, Brigadier Mashiga, and also phone calls from the Minister. I think it's from, I can't see whether it's from or to the Minister of Police. So that's what I essentially wanted to ask you about. The reason this arose was it came out during the evidence of the Provincial Commissioner that she sent you an SMS at 16:02:19. That's the 5th call on this on this page, and we wanted to know what it was about. Can you recall receiving such an SMS, or was your telephone off at the time?
Pardon me, Chairperson, I thought you were still summarizing a number of issues. Thank you very much for those.
The question to you again, so you can concentrate. On the 5th page of this document, okay, the 5th call reflected there is a call from Lieutenant General Mbomba, the Provincial Commissioner, to you at 16:02:19, which is about 9 minutes after the shooting at Scene 1. And it's described as MO SMS, so it's an SMS. Was your phone on at the time? In other words, did you receive that SMS at about that time?
Chairperson, thank you very much. I received this note this morning, and I would like to say, first and foremost, we're talking about matters that took place 2 years ago. And in my testimony, Chair, I have indicated that I spoke to General Mbomba, I spoke to the Minister, I speak to many people. The details of issues that are being raised here may not be recalled by myself.
I understand that, and I don't want to be unreasonable, but the important point we have to bear in mind is that the shootings at Scene 1 took place over, there's a dispute whether it was 8 seconds or 12 seconds, but you and I don't have to debate that, at about 7 minutes to 4 in the afternoon. And you were obviously informed at some stage thereafter about what had happened. And I would have thought that if you'd had a conversation shortly before you were informed of the shooting, which actually turned out to have been made after the shooting took place, that's something that you would have thought about and wondered about, and that's the sort of thing that would have stuck in your mind. But the first question really is whether your telephone was on at that time. Because if it wasn't on, then the fact the phone call is recorded doesn't take it any further, because you wouldn't have got the call. You understand the point I'm putting to you? So can you remember whether your phone was on just around about 4 o'clock on the Thursday, around about the time, just after, in fact, the time when the shooting took place?
Chairperson, I certainly do not remember whether it was on or off.
I see. Now, Brigadier Phiyega is reflected in the line which I referred you to, the fifth line, is this SMS which was sent, or perhaps an attempt was made to send to you by Lieutenant General Mbombo. Then the next entry, I understand, is the reverse side of that same call, so it wasn't as if you tried to phone her back. But in the next entry, which is the seventh on that page, is Brigadier Phiyega, the South African Police Service spokesperson. Now, I understand CF stands for call for, so call forward. Now, can you remember whether just after the time when the shooting took place, you were in communication with Brigadier Phiyega?
I would have been in communication with Brigadier Phiyega because being the communications person, I would have probably wanted to know what is happening and all that, but I would not be able to recall the details.
I see. So what you can tell us is as soon as you got inkling of the fact that something serious had happened, you would immediately have contacted Brigadier Phiyega. I know I'm putting words in your mouth, and if I'm doing it unfairly, please say so. But is it fair to say that if you got inkling that something awkward had happened, terrible had happened, at Marikana, you would immediately, or as soon as you possibly thereafter as you could, have contacted Brigadier Phiyega in order to get full details and information? Is that fair?
Chairperson, the way to put it would be this, that when such a thing happened, I would be informed. I would also inquire. And I guess it is in that spirit that I would have touched particular points. The provincial commissioner, the communications person, that's what would have happened. The details, as I've already said, I would not recall.
Thank you. Now, so that was the first topic I wanted to deal with you to see if you could help us. The next topic actually, relates to the ad hoc meeting which was held after the National Management Forum meeting on Wednesday, the 15th of August. What is described in the draft minutes as the extraordinary session of the National Management Forum. According to Provincial Commissioner Mbombo, who testified after you did, the meeting lasted less than an hour. She herself spoke, she said, as did you yourself, General Mawela, General Masimola, and some of the other provincial commissioners. So it went on for just under an hour, I think. Now, what I'd like to know is what was said during that meeting. It's obviously a very important meeting, because that was the meeting which, according to the minutes, endorsed the proposal, that's the way it's put, by the provincial commissioner. So I want to know what was said during that meeting, and on what grounds those present, as it was put in the minutes, and I'm quoting, endorsed the proposal to disarm the protesting masses, and further indicated that additional resources must be made available upon identification by the Provincial Commissioner North West. That's the end of the quote. Now, Provincial Commissioner Mbombo told us that her address, as she called it, couldn't have taken more than about 10 minutes. She said 10 to 15 minutes. Now, we know some of the surrounding circumstances. And so we should be able to reconstruct some, at least, of what she and the others who participated in what the minutes called the deliberations said at the meeting. Now, the first thing I would ask you is, what did Provincial Commissioner Mbombo say in her address?
I have already given testimony on the chairperson, and if I may paraphrase...
I'm sorry, General, you did, National Commissioner, you didn't. in your evidence, that's why I asked you to come back. When you testified before, you didn't tell us about me. You said you had a discussion with her, I think, at tea, after the main meeting ended. You didn't mention that everyone was then called together, everyone was still there, was called together. And what the minutes describe as an extraordinary session took place, which lasted for up to an hour, which various people spoke. That you didn't mention. So don't tell me what you told us before, because you didn't deal with that before. That's why I've got you back to ask you these questions now. So I'll ask you the question again. What did Provincial Commissioner Mbombo say in her address?
Chairperson, I think you actually did not give me time to finish the sentence I had started. I had said...
I'm sorry, please finish it now then.
Yes, I will do so, Chair. I had said in the meeting, I spoke about the extraordinary, in my testimony, the extraordinary meeting we referred to. The question you're asking me, in the meeting that we had, General Mbombo briefed us about the situation in Marikana, shared with us their plan to disarm the protesters. We also, in that meeting, because I had the other provincial commissioner, spoke about them giving her support, as I had indicated in some of my response to this commission. The issue of deployment, sharing resources for public order policing, sit in my remit. Those are the issues that we focused upon in that discussion, and that is why we had people such as General Mawela, General Masemola, who are people who are in charge of operations in policing.
I see. Now, the minutes talk about a proposal which the Provincial Commissioner Northwest made. What was the proposal?
Chair, the issue I raised is that she indicated to us that their plan is to disarm the protesters.
She say when that was to be executed?
Yes, they were planning to do that on the 16th.
And now, I said that we have we know what the surrounding circumstances were. What I'd like to ask you about that is this. We know that for some days there'd been images on the television screens of the strikers parading around on the kopje, brandishing dangerous weapons. We know that people had been killed over that period from the 12th onwards. We know that some of the strikers were in possession of firearms which had been taken from the police on the Monday the 13th. And we know that as far as the outside world was concerned, the people who were watching the television screens, no action was apparently being taken to disarm or arrest the strikers. Now, did that give rise to any dissatisfaction that was expressed at the meeting, either by you or any of your colleagues who was present?
I think, Chairperson, to say nothing was being done to disarm, earlier on, we had heard in this commission that General Mpembe himself was asking for those weapons. It has always been a concern for us as the police that the law was not being abided with, because we know that our country allows people to protest, and we know that the law requires them to do it peacefully. And this is why General Mpembe would have said, I'm not interested in many things. I'm interested in you putting down your weapons. So the 16th was not a new thing to talk about disarming, because we wanted to monitor the protest as it is our responsibility, but we were aware that the weapons were an unlawful piece, and that's why we listened to General Mbombo telling us about their plan to disarm the protesters.
I'm afraid you haven't answered my question, so I shall have to repeat it. There was an incident on the 13th, as you correctly say, where General Mpembe asked them to lay down their arms and they didn't do so. And there were various things that happened thereafter which you don't have to explore. But the question I asked you was whether anybody at that meeting, you or anybody else, expressed any dissatisfaction that nothing appeared to have been done to disarm the strikers after that?
Chairperson, I would not recall in those terms, but I know that we supported the need to disarm the protesters.
Was any criticism expressed at all? So this is now Wednesday night. Every night we see these images on the television. They're still walking around on the copy, brandishing the weapons. They've got the firearms. Nothing appears to be done to disarm them. Did anybody say that?
I do not recall any type of criticism as such, but what I recall is that we supported the need to disarm the protesters.
Right. Now, did the Provincial Commissioner explain why there'd been this failure or omission to do anything tactical, positive to disarm the strikers up to then? Did she tell you, for example, that it had been decided to try to solve the problem by negotiation first, that it wouldn't have been appropriate to have done anything tactically on the Wednesday morning because the negotiations were still ongoing? It would have been a breach of faith, in fact, to have, as it were, ambushed the strikers while negotiations were still going on. Did she mention that?
I do not recall that, Chairperson, but what I know for a fact is that, the principles of negotiations are crucial in how we do these processes. And I think with hindsight, looking at what has happened, I would like to believe that a lot was done to give negotiations a chance.
Yes. So, but you say you can't remember that she said that?
No, I don't recall that type of conversation.
I see. Now, did she tell you anything about the plan that they had? They had a plan, and in fact, according to the evidence of Lieutenant Colonel Scott, who was the chief planner, the only plan which the JOCOM had approved involved circling the strikers who were on the copy at daybreak, when only a few strikers would be there, and thereafter dealing with the others as they arrived. This was thought would be a way of dealing with the matter in a relatively risk-free fashion. And this couldn't happen later in the morning because then there would be many other strikers would have arrived and the situation would have been such that the plan could not be carried out successfully. Did she report that to you?
At the meeting of the 15th, we did not discuss the plan.
Anything about what they proposed doing before that?
No, I've never asked for those details, Chairperson.
You did have a conversation with her on Tuesday the 14th, didn't you? A telephone conversation.
I can check here, Chairperson. Okay. Yes, Chair.
At 14:32, it's on the first page, at 14:32:06, you had a conversation with her lasting 64 seconds. Is that correct?
Yes, I've said
Yes.
that.
Now, we have a recording of her side of the conversation. It's exhibit quadruple J 192 bis. And on the first page,
I don't have it.
this is what has been transcribed. Now, admittedly, this is only her talking to you. We don't know what your answers were.
Must I read it on the screen?
We have it on the screen. It starts actually at 3 lines from the foot of the page. Could we have a little bit further down, further down? Just after the yes, okay, just the bottom of the screen at the moment is yes, okay, just below that. Interruption by a telephone call. This is now General Mbombo, or Provincial Commissioner Mbombo talking. Yes, General, I'm still well, General. I was just going to call you and give you a rundown feedback. But can you give me an hour, General? Because we are moving in. And maybe after an hour I can give you a feedback in terms of what will have transpired. No, it's still quiet. But we just got information just now. They are once again mobilizing in another side whilst in that mountain. I was there. There are about 800 to 1,000 that are there. So we're thinking, whilst they're at that number, we can maybe circle them around. But they're once again mobilizing on the other side, they say the western side. So we just wanted to observe, but I'll come back to you in an hour's time. All right, thanks, bye. You remember that conversation?
Could have been one of the feedback conversations, yes.
And did she come back to you?
I do not recall, Chair.
Well, according to your telephone list, you had a conversation with her for 303 seconds at 18:20. It's near the top of the second page. Remember that conversation?
Chair, yes, the call should have taken place, yes.
Can you remember what was said?
Chairperson, I have said already earlier on that I've had a lot of conversations, but I wouldn't be able to recall that one specifically.
I see. Because I must say, I would have expected her to have told you what the plan was. I've told you what the plan was according to the evidence we received. I would have expected her following up the conversation of which we've had her side on the transcript. I would have expected her, when she phoned you later, to have told you what I've just put to you, but you can't remember that at all. Is that fair?
The detail, Chairperson, I acknowledge that she could have come back. There's a lot that has been discussed about this process of Marikana. But to say to you, Chair, that I recall the details of that 303 in the midst of this many calls, I can no longer package them in that fashion.
All right. Of course, you wouldn't have had that difficulty in remembering the call on the 15th because it had only taken place the day before.
Chairperson, I'm honest. I really do not want to lie to the Commission.
No, I'm not. No, forgive me. I'm not asking you now to say something you can't remember. It's the last thing I want you to do. But what I'm putting to you is that on the 15th, at that meeting on the Wednesday evening, you would have been in a much better position to remember what General Mbombo had told you the night before in that 5-minute conversation that we've seen that took place after 6 o'clock. That's correct, isn't it? You may have had lots of phone calls, but surely the Marikana situation was a very serious one. And a report you'd received from the Provincial Commissioner the day before is something you still would have remembered then, surely?
Chairperson, what I'm saying is, indeed what she would have given me feedback would have been what is happening in Marikana.
And not the plan?
And if we have a meeting on the 16th, those issues would still be the same. And if she comes on the 16th to say, we're planning now to go and disarm, because we haven't disarmed them, it would still be a continuation of a discussion.
Yes. All right. Well, I put the question to you. Now, the difficulty that arose on the Wednesday night was this. The information that I think you had was there was an indication from Mr. Matunja of AMCU that the strikers might be prepared, I think he may put it even more strongly than that, probably would be prepared to lay down their arms on the Thursday morning. But it was indicated that that wouldn't happen until after 9 o'clock because he was going to go back to the Kopi to speak to the strikers at 9 o'clock. Now, were you told that by the Provincial Commissioner?
That conversation did come at some point.
All right. Now, you see, that gives rise to a problem. Because if the plan was, as I summarized it to you, to have a tactical option at daybreak, and there are a few people on the Kopi who can be dealt with fairly easily, putting wire around them, and then to deal with others as they approached, because the evidence was that most of these strikers used to go home at night, come back in the morning, go home for lunch, and come back in the afternoon, go home again at night. So if you go early in the morning, put a wire around the Kopi, deal with the few people who are there, and then deal with the others as they come, that, as I've said, is a relatively risk-free way of proceeding. But you couldn't do that later in the day when there were already well over 1,000, possibly 2,000 people on the Kopi. So that plan wouldn't work. That's what Lieutenant Colonel Scott conceded in his evidence. Now, if you could only know on Thursday, at some stage after 9 o'clock, whether they were going to lay down their arms, or whether you'd have to go to the tactical option, that plan could not be implemented on the Thursday. Did you know that?
I don't know that, Chairperson.
You did not know that?
Me.
You did not know that?
No.
Right. So I must tell you that I would have expected the Provincial Commissioner to have conveyed that to you and your colleagues who were at that meeting, but you say she failed to do so.
It was not the plan to discuss the plan, Chairperson. I have said that earlier on. The meeting did not discuss the plan. It wasn't the forum for it.
Yeah, but what the meeting did do, according to the minutes, was it endorsed her proposal to move to the tactical option the next day. She herself said, I must tell you, that she conceded very readily that tactical operations weren't her forte. That wasn't her field of experience. Her field of experience was more financial administration. And she said that there were a number of seasoned operational people present there that night, including, I think, Provincial Commissioner Petros from Gauteng, who'd actually been with you there on the Monday night. And if any one of them had said, but this isn't a good idea to proceed tomorrow, you must rather wait a bit, she would have listened to that and not proceeded with the decision to proceed the next morning. Now, you see, what interests me is that the meeting took up to an hour. So what was discussed? That's what I'm trying to find out. It's very important for us to know why the decision was taken to proceed on the Thursday morning, why that bore the approval, as it apparently did, because it was endorsed, by those present at that meeting. We've tried to ascertain whether a tape is available of what was said. The proceedings are normally taped, but we run into a brick wall as far as that's concerned. I won't debate that with you. But it's important for us to find out what exactly was said. Now, you say, one thing you can say is she didn't mention the problems that I summarized to you. That's correct, is it?
Yes.
Right. Now, and I've already told you I thought she would be under duty to have done that, but she didn't do that. Did she at any stage mention the possibility of postponing the operation till the Friday morning, when they could have possibly acted in this relatively risk-free way at daybreak? Was that mentioned by her at all?
I do not recall that, Chair. I don't remember that.
So you can't remember whether she mentioned the possibility of postponing the operation till sunrise on the Friday, all right? Now, what I'd like to know is I'd like to know what everybody who was there said, so far as you can remember it. It was a very important meeting, the kind of meeting I would imagine you would have thought about again after the catastrophe the next day. What did you say during the discussions?
Chairperson, as I've said, we had a briefing about the situation. Questions were asked. We discussed the resourcing, and that was the purpose of the meeting. And then we endorsed her plan to do whatever. And in each of the circumstances, really, she has people that are operational assistants, as she said, who would have done the plan in the province, in the Ajok, and all those things. So I think the background of the backdrop of that meeting was that if there are any specific plans to be done, she would have done that with her people. We did not discuss the plan.
Did any of the generals who were there, who were experienced in operations, inquire how the disarming was to be effected?
As I say, Chairperson, we had people from operations, and the question of disarming and whatever, it's a known process. And when somebody says we're going to encircle, disarm, it's a known process. Any police person would know what to do in terms of their own prescripts and protocol. Well, I don't remember us, really going into details around those type of aspects.
Well, details is one thing, but I must tell you that I would have expected experienced policemen to have inquired about this particular operation. This isn't just a simple disarming operation. Here were 3,000 people. There's a debate as to how many of them had dangerous weapons, but at least 400 of them had dangerous weapons. As your meeting was taking place, General Mpembe was saying to Mr. Sekwana of NUM that it would be a very dangerous thing to try to disarm, as he put it, to disarm a man with an axe if you're armed with a rifle. It would be a very dangerous thing to do without the serious risk of bloodshed, which is why he suggested another way forward. But let's not debate that. You don't know anything about that. But he obviously was concerned that it wasn't just a simple disarming process. It could be done without any trouble. So what I asked you, which you haven't quite answered yet, let me repeat the question. Did any of the generals there who were experienced in operations inquire, not necessarily for details, but inquire how the disarming was to be effected in a way which was not likely to lead to bloodshed?
Chair, as I've already indicated, the conversation about disarming and all those type of took place. Those type of details of whether there was inquiry, the plan we did not discuss. The modus operandi of disarming and whatever could have been a conversation, but I don't recall really specifically around that, because at that point in time, even your memory is not grasping that. It's a conversation trying to understand what is happening in the environment, what is going to be done, and what one can clearly say was that we supported and endorsed their plan to disarm the protesters.
Are you telling this commission that not one of those experienced generals, Masemoa and Mavela from head office, all the other provincial commissioners, not one of them inquired whether there were any risks, raised a note of caution about the possibility of bloodshed, mentioned the furore that had arisen as a result of the killing of Mr. Tani? Did nobody raise any cautionary note at all about the risk of bloodshed? Is that what you're telling this commission?
That is not what I'm telling this commission, Chair. I'm saying
Are you
that
telling us then?
I have said, Chairperson, the issue of disarming the protesters was discussed. The detail of what was asked, I don't have it, Chairperson. I don't have it in my head recorded in that narrative sense that you are asking from me. The issue of disarming the protesters was discussed and was endorsed. But what you are asking of me is to have that photographic memory of saying what happened. I don't have it.
No, I'm afraid I'm not communicating to you properly what interests me. Perhaps I must ask again. I wouldn't have thought that the risk of bloodshed, the risk of death in the course of the operation would have been simply described as a detail which doesn't have to be considered further. It wasn't. That wouldn't have been a detail. That surely would have been a fundamental matter which should have been considered by people asked to endorse the proposal, asked to make resources available so that the proposal could be implemented. Now, are you saying it wasn't discussed? It was simply a detail that could be disregarded? Surely that's not what you're telling us.
Chairperson, I think to say simply a detail, it's taking it light. I'm not taking anything light. We had a very serious discussion, and we considered the proposal that was being put on the table. As to whether it was us in the fashion that you are putting it, I am saying I cannot recall in that detail. That's what I'm saying, Chair.
Oh, I see. All right. Now, you see, there's a further problem about that. It wasn't just a simple POPs disarm and disperse operation, because we know, and you knew at the time, that a significant number of TRT people, NIU people, and STF people were present and were taking part in the operation. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair.
All right. So I can understand routine disarm. I can understand routine disarmament and dispersal operations. Those you don't go into detail. That follows the ordinary course. But this was, everyone concedes, a unique event in South African policing history. This was a problem. To be fair, I mean, one's got to be aware of that all the time. This was some people have said that the police failed because it was something they'd never experienced before, and in a sense one can understand that and sympathize with that. But this wasn't a routine thing. This was, since 1994, this was this most important operation of the kind that the police had ever taken part in. Isn't that correct?
It is very correct, Chair.
There had already been problems, very serious controversy arising because of the death of one person, Mr. Tatani. So if this operation had involved the death of even a dozen strikers, that would have been regarded as a very serious matter, wouldn't it?
I agree, Chair.
Now, surely someone of these experienced people who was there must have raised up his hand and said, let's be careful, let's just look at it objectively and carefully to make sure that nothing doesn't go badly wrong. Are you saying none of them did that?
Chairperson, I have tried to give my position on that one, and I want to also indicate that we should recall that as we were meeting, there was a whole setup that was managing the operation there. As you've already indicated in your earlier question to me, General Mbokmo talks about very skilled people in operations that are meeting to manage the operation in Rustenburg, as we're sitting here in Midrand. You mentioned the issue of General Mpembe talking to other people. As we talk around this briefing, around this situation, around resourcing, there's a team that is managing what is happening on the ground, Chairperson. And that backdrop is very important because we are comfortable as leaders that there are people who are managing what is taking place, who are taking feedback, who are listening, who are endorsing, because the nitty-gritties of the plan is sitting where the operation is taking place.
Yes, well, we'll deal with that matter in a moment, but I'm not interested in whether you knew the nitty-gritty, as you put it. I'm interested in, as I've told you, I'm trying to find out what happened in the course of discussion, because it was a very, very important discussion, as it turned out. Now, the fact that the proposal was endorsed by this meeting, the fact that the people there all agreed to make resources available as required, surely means that they cannot evade responsibility and say, we knew about the plan, we said, sure, go ahead, we endorse it, we'll make resources available, but if it goes wrong because it was managed badly or it was defective in the planning, that's nothing to do with us. Surely there comes a time when responsibility must rest with those people at that meeting as well. They can't just say, well, the people on the spot, they must carry the can, they're responsible for what happened. You people endorsed the proposal, agreed to make resources available, you cannot surely evade responsibility. Now, not to be fair to you, I didn't suggest that you were saying that. But if it's correct that they had the responsibility, and would have had the responsibility, I must tell you, I would have expected at least one or two of them to have said, hang on a second, let's just interrogate this proposal. Let's just see it doesn't go badly wrong and leave us with terrible problems and responsibility for something that we don't want to happen. You're saying you can't remember anybody doing that?
Chairperson, I think I've indicated that the details of the discussion, unfortunately my mind doesn't take me that far. The discussions around the plan to encircle and to disarm those people, there was a discussion about disarming those people. But the detail, Chairperson, as you are asking me to respond to, I am not able to give that detail.
Well, you and I think, will have to agree to disagree on the question of whether I'm asking you about detail or something else. But anyway, I asked you what you said. Can you remember what you said? Not the whole thing, obviously, but can you give us a sort of one or two sentence summary of what you said?
What I said was that we are gathered to get feedback from General Mbombo, briefing on what is happening in Marikana, because it was a situation that was concerning all of us. She gave us that feedback. She shared with us what their plans are in terms of disarming the protesters, because it's an issue for us to say, how do you manage a public order situation where people are armed the way they are armed, because it makes it difficult for you to do your normal work. And then because there were needs for more people, the numbers that you're talking about, 3,000 people at the Kopi, and every day those processes we were talking about how we're going to give additional support in terms of water cannons, additional people, all those type of issues, and when they can be released to go and give support.
There was a further aspect about this situation which made it unprecedented. In the run-up to the events of the 16th, we know that 10 people had died, 3 strikers and 7 others. Now that also indicated a number of things, didn't it? Amongst other things, it indicated the kind of people you were dealing with. People who didn't hesitate, according to the information you had, to murder others because they were participating in an unprotected strike. You must have known that, surely?
Yes, I do.
You were dealing with people who were likely to put up a fight, who were in possession of dangerous weapons, in fact, some firearms also. So the chances of managing this operation without bloodshed, even on a relatively large scale, were quite great, weren't they?
True, Chairperson.
With no one signed the you say you can't remember anyone signing a cautionary note on that. That would have been a detail that wouldn't have stayed in your mind. Is that what you're telling us?
That would have, because I said it was a difficult situation, Chairperson. The armed protesters and all that history would have influenced our discussions, because we wanted to understand the disarming, and we knew that they have to be disarmed because we all can already see that there are other deaths, there's violence in this protest. And this is why we wouldn't have mobilized anybody if there wasn't a need to give support. We mobilized because we were noticing the issues that you are mentioning as an organization.
Now, who raised these points? We know that the senior officer in charge of operational responses was present at your meeting, is that right?
Yes, senior officers.
General Annandale, Major General Annandale, was at Marikana, but his immediate superior was at your meeting.
Correct, Chair.
Was that General Masimano or General Mawela?
General Mawela, Chair.
Did he open his mouth? We know he spoke at the meeting because the Provincial Commissioner told us that. What did he say?
I don't recall, Chair. We spoke as a team. You are asking me for the details that I cannot be able to say to you. Riah said this one said. I'm not able to say. I know we had a discussion.
Yes. All right. This was a very important meeting, we know that.
I do say yes.
Skeletal minutes were kept.
I beg your pardon?
Very skeletal minutes were kept. There were no note made of who said what during the debate. That's not available to us. It's the practice normally to tape record meetings, but we've tried to get hold of a tape. As I say, we've run into a brick wall about that. There's a debate whether there was a tape, but I don't have to debate that with you. But you can't tell me what General Mawela said. Can you remember what General Masimano said?
I don't recall.
And I won't go through them all, but there's one person I'm interested in particularly, and that's Major General Petros. Lieutenant General Petros. He was the Provincial Commissioner of Gauteng. He'd actually been to Marikana with you on the Monday, and he'd spoken to the members of the SAPS who were there, and also been present, I think, when you spoke to London. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, sure.
Did he take part in the discussion?
He probably did because he was part of that meeting, but I would not recall what he said.
I see. All right. Now, I just want to get one thing clear. I think it's implicit in what you're saying. But I just want to get one thing clear. I think it's implicit in what you've said already. Just want to make sure I don't misunderstand you. Are you seriously suggesting that the meeting endorsed the proposal without knowing what the details of the operation were?
That is not my response to you, Chair.
What is your response?
My response to you is that we were briefed about the situation. We were advised about the action that was going to take place. There were engagements, but I cannot recall in detailed terms what the engagement, what the responses and the inputs were. And we also discussed resourcing. Like right now, Chair, I won't be able to tell you unless I go to the records to say who gave the water cannon and how many people came from where. It's what I'm saying to you, Chair, that detail is not quite what is in my head. And because we didn't record, I'm not able to say, Phiyega said this, Mawela said. I'm not able to say that.
My understanding is the water cannon had already been arranged, but... Sorry? Yes, one extra water cannon came on Thursday. Anyway, that's a detail I think it's fair for me to ask you about. But what I want to know from you is, I'm not interested in details, but did anybody ask for some kind of assurance that the risk of bloodshed had been adequately considered and that measures were in place to ensure that if there was bloodshed, it would be kept to the minimum?
Chairperson, that detail, as I say, I'm not able to say yes or no to, because I'll be doing some injustice, because you would want me to say who was saying that. I don't know. That discussion must have taken place, because we're discussing this disarming and whatever. I'm not able to give those pedantic details, Chairperson.
Well, I want to make 2 points to you. One is not a pedantic detail. The second point is that you wouldn't be doing an injustice to the person who raised the problem. You'd be doing the opposite. But you can't help me on that. All right? Now, the next thing I want to ask you about, the next topic I want to ask you about, is something that occurred at Roots, or more accurately, what didn't occur at Roots. Was the fact that this decision that we're talking about, the endorsement of the proposal, the undertaking to make extra resources available, was discussed for up to an hour at your meeting on the Wednesday, before the shootings on the Thursday. Was that fact mentioned at all at the meetings at Roots?
I don't understand your question, Chair. Can you repeat your question?
Yes, of course. We were told in the course of the sittings of the Commission that any previous evidence that we'd heard which indicated the decision was taken to proceed to the operational option on the Thursday was no longer the SAP's case. And the SAP's case now was the decision was taken on the Wednesday night by the Provincial Commissioner, and it was endorsed at this meeting. That's what we were told here. Now, what I want to know from you is the fact that there was this discussion at the extraordinary session of the NMF, or the ad hoc meeting of those left behind, whatever phrase you want to use, and this proposal was endorsed and undertakings were given to make additional resources available. Was that mentioned at all? Was that disclosed to the participants in the Roots conference?
Chairperson, I think maybe let me just step back. I have already indicated that at the source in Rustenburg, there are people who are operating, who are planning. I take it that the commander of the province would then have feedback to those that she is working with. At Roots, the disclosure, I don't know, I don't understand the question you're asking to say, was it disclosed at Roots? Because that support would have already been part of the operations that are taking place in the province the following day.
Well, I don't know why you can't understand the question, but I must accept the blame for not asking it with sufficient clarity. We know that, because the Provincial Commissioner told us this, that she did tell General Annandale, and she did tell General Mpembe, and she did tell General Naidu. That she told us. And she told them that in the evening. She phoned them after the meeting. But a number of the people who took part in the operation were asked about that. They said they didn't know about the decision on the Wednesday night, including Colonel Scott. Said he didn't know about it. Heard about it much later. So the question I'm asking you is, was it disclosed at Roots? As far as you're aware, obviously you weren't at all the sessions of Roots, you attended some of them, I understand. But as far as you're aware, was that decision, endorsement of that proposal, whatever expression you want to use, was that disclosed to the people at Roots, in your presence, to your knowledge?
Chairperson, Roots, you mean an after-the-fact meeting? Is that what we're talking about?
It was a meeting that you had that took place, Roots, that took place over several days. I've got an idea it was about 3 weeks, but I may be wrong on that, at which the SAP's presentation before this commission was being compiled, put together, okay, which is Exhibit L. And the evidence is that, in fact, you saw Exhibit L before it was finalized. Do you agree with that?
Yes, Chair.
Right. Now, that was what was going on at Roots. There were people who were involved in the various aspects of the operation. They went into separate sessions. They then came to a plenary session, and there were report backs. And Colonel Visser, I think it was responsible for recording what was said. It was a lengthy process designed to prepare the SAPS case before this commission. So now you know what you reminded what Roots was. And you were there some of the time, and you saw the draft of L before it was finalized, Exhibit L, SAP's presentation. Now, what I want to know, is, to your knowledge, was the fact that this matter was discussed at the meeting on the Wednesday night, and this decision was taken, this proposal was endorsed, agreement was made to make resources available, was that communicated to anybody at Roots, to your knowledge, in your presence, or even in your absence, if we were told about it later? The answer to that is either yes or no.
Chair, the import of the question you're asking is that post the discussion we would have had with General Mbombo, surely she would have discussed it with the generals or the people that are in charge of the operation in the province. And that would have been around the 15th or the 16th. Roots is after the fact. So I wouldn't see discussion of that as a disclosure. It would be a continuation of discussion, but I'm not even sure whether, that matter, I wouldn't recall whether we were discussing it as a disclosure or as a matter for information. It would have been a matter of fact, because those that operated would have known that we met on the 15th, and on the 16th the operation continued. So it wouldn't be a new thing in Roots.
So it sounds to me, I hope I won't be accused of unfairly summarizing your answer. Firstly, you don't like the word disclosure because you think it wasn't necessary to disclose it, because it had been disclosed certainly to General Annandale and General Mpembe and General Naidu on either the evening of the 15th or on the 16th.
Because, Chair, it wasn't a secret.
Yes, no. But what you're also telling me is that you cannot say that it was even discussed in your presence at the Roots meeting, Roots conference. I think that's a fair summary of what you said. You agree with me?
I'm not sure, Chair, whether it was discussed on that day when I was at Roots.
All right. Now, you also said, however, that you saw Exhibit L before it was finalized.
Yes, Chair.
Did you, I take it you gave your approval to what was in it? If there's been something in it that you didn't like, you'd have said so. Or something that was left out that you thought should have been put in, you'd have said so too. Is that fair?
If there's something left out, yes, I would have said so. And it would have been a document that could be improved or be done other things.
Yes, I know that, but I mean, it was actually shown to you before it was finalized, wasn't it? It wasn't just for interest's sake, I take it. So you could come with inputs. You can say, that's wrong, or that something is important that you haven't mentioned. You could have done that, couldn't you?
It is true. If I've seen something else, I would have said.
Right. So clearly, by implication, you approved it.
Chairperson, to say I approved it, it's approval and endorsing are two different things.
All right. Well, let me then put the question in the negative. You didn't disapprove it.
I did not disapprove
right.
it.
Okay, that's enough for me. Now, there's no mention in Exhibit L of the meeting on the Wednesday night, of the decision taken, the proposal was endorsed, the agreement to make resources available. Why was that?
But Chair, I've already said earlier on when you asked me to say that type of feedback would have been given to the operating people, and General Annandale and General Mpembe would have known about feedback from General Mbombo. So for me, it wouldn't have been a new thing to be included or to be excluded. If it's an omission, it's an omission.
Yes, I understand that. It's very nice that General Annandale and General Mpembe and General Naidu knew about it. It wasn't so nice that the Commission didn't know about it, and the Commission wasn't told about it. And it only came to light somewhere after a considerable amount of time had elapsed in the course of the sessions of this commission. But then I ask you again, you, as the National Commission, shown the presentation before it was finalised, did not consider it appropriate for something to be put in that presentation which alerted this commission to the fact of the meeting on the Wednesday night and the decision that was taken, the proposal was endorsed and so forth. Can you explain that?
Chairperson, what I can say to you is that it was never a secret, never intended to be one. If it's an omission, it was an omission.
I hope you won't take umbrage if I say that it certainly appeared to be a secret to us until it came out at a later stage. But I see it's now 10:30. I suggest we take the first comfort break at this stage, and I have a few more questions for you when we resume.
Thank you.
15 minutes.
You.
Fine.